Hi there, my name is Claire Forrest and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at University College London in the Institute of Education. So I'm focused on language development and language disorders, and my PhD I did at the University of Bath, and that focused on developmental language disorder in adolescents and how it's linked to increased social and emotional difficulties. So I carried out a number of studies for my PhD, um, basically working with the same select group of adolescents with developmental language disorder, or DLD. And so I tested their language using a standardized assessment, the KELF, which stands for the Clinical Evaluation of Language Fundamentals. And this is, a standardized test that is very helpful because it gives you norms to compare against, or averages. So you can see where these children lie, and within the bell curve, typically for a disorder, we look at the tail end of the bell curve. So we would say any children falling 1.5 standard deviations below the mean have a language disorder. And we also measured their social and emotional outcomes. So we used standardized questionnaires. So some of them were self-report, some of them the parents filled in. And then we also did some experiments using computers. So one of these was the social evaluation learning task. And this was where the child sat in front of a computer and they were given two options of words. One was positive and one was negative. And the computer said, "I think you are," for example, "witty or dull." And the child clicked on one and then they got feedback saying correct or incorrect. So they started to learn or build up a picture of how the computer viewed them. And so this was that learning evaluation, or social evaluation. And at the end, the children were asked to rate on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did the computer like you, or how much did the computer dislike you, depending on what you thought, if you were getting more negative words than positive words. And so this was able to show us that children with language disorder were not as good at identifying when they were disliked as children without a language disorder. So kind of showing how the processes involved in social situations are different for children or adolescents with DLD. The other computer task I used was the social attribution task. And this is a really nice little silent animation of two triangles and a circle. And you just watch the clip, it's about a minute long, and then you're asked to describe what happened in the story. And typically, even though it's just shapes and it's just an animation, we can't help but apply or attribute social situations or personalities to these shapes. And so that's what we're also looking at again, whether the children with DLD were poorer at this than the children without DLD. So again, it was giving us some ideas of how they're interpreting social situations and nonverbal cues. So those were some of the methods that I used there. So as I say, it was one-on-one assessments, and there was some experimental or computerized tasks, and there were some self-report forms as well, and some parent forms. So in my current role as a postdoc, I've just finished a randomized control trial, and this time we were focusing on language development in the early years. So instead of adolescents, I've been working with children in nurseries, so age 3 to 4 years old. This was a randomized control trial, or an RCT, which is considered like the gold standard in experimental studies, because we wanted to evaluate whether an intervention called talking time was actually appropriate and could actually make a difference in the children's language. So talking time is an intervention directed towards nursery staff. So they sit with the children, a small group of children, twice a week for 15 minutes each, reading books and playing with toys. And they're trained how to do this in such a way that it actually helps improve the children's vocab, or that's the aim of it anyway. So they're really engaging with the books. They're not just reading the story, but they're asking the children what they think, trying to relate some of the words back to the children's own lives, and make it more of a conversation rather than just reading to the children. Because we know from prior research that this really does help build children's vocabulary. So the more words they're exposed to and in different scenarios really helps their own language development. So as I say, it was a randomized control trial. So we recruited 40 nurseries. Half of them were given this training for 17 weeks, and then half of them were just told to continue as normal. So they both received the same set of books, but only half of the groups actually were using them twice a week with the children, reading with them, and really trying to engage the children's language development. We recruited children, these nurseries from across London and the North East, and they were all areas of deprivation, so in the lowest 20th percentile of deprivation based on the school's postcodes. And so we did a test beforehand. So in September 2021, we did a baseline measurement. So we again did one-on-one testing with children, looking at their language abilities. And this time we used the British Ability Scales. And we also looked at their non-verbal abilities, also on the BAS. And we did, again, a computerized task looking at different aspects of language. So it was their vocab, their grammar or syntax, and their comprehension. And we also gave some questionnaires to the parents about the children's language that they use at home, and also their strengths and difficulties. So we were again looking kind of at that social and emotional functioning as well, to see whether the language is related in any way. So everyone got tested at baseline. Half of the children got the intervention from January to May, and then in May 2022 to July, we did all the follow-up testing. So it's the exact same testing we did in September. So the only thing that changed was whether or not the schools had this training or not. And that's how we're able to compare how good it is. So we can see, compared to normal practice every day, did it improve the children's language? We're just writing up the final results right now, and we did find an intervention effect. So for the children's expressive vocabulary, those who were in the intervention group, they did improve. So this was slightly different from the PhD. It was a much larger scale. We had nearly 600 children in total from these 40 different nurseries. And as I say, it was in two settings. So I was in charge of the London nurseries, and we had a team of research assistants who went in to do the administration of the tests, because there's no way I could have done that myself. And we also had another postdoc up in Newcastle, and she had some research assistants there as well. So these were the main methods that we used. A huge scale project, really, and so we also needed some very good project management skills. Thankfully, we did start this project before COVID, so we kind of had an idea of what we needed to do anyway. We had a break over COVID when the schools all shut, and then we started again in 2021. So that actually really helped us, and we already had a lot of things in place, because before we'd already, reviewed what actual tests we needed, because what were we really trying to measure, and we want to make sure that we're, for validity, that we're actually measuring what we want to measure. We also, had to do a lot of recruitment, a lot of communication with schools, a lot of keeping on track of, who said yes, who hasn't, who still needs to fill in some forms, getting the materials out to schools, getting the consent forms out to parents. So the schools provided us with support there. In certain cases, some schools, in order to get the parents on board, we went into the school and we had a little coffee morning, and we spoke with the parents all about the study, what was involved, and what was expected of their children, and why it would be useful in the grand scheme of things. We also, had a team. So there was my PI, so the principal investigator is Julie Dockrell, based at the IOE. We had James Law, who was in Newcastle, and we also had Sandra Mathers is in Oxford. So she was more in charge of the intervention side of things. So we had two trainers who went into the schools in the North East and in London to train them up on the intervention. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of different people involved. So yeah, communication was definitely key in with that respect. And of course, with so many children, with almost 600 children, and forms coming back from parents as well, we needed really good organisational skills. So all our data was kept in spreadsheets, password protected, and then we also have the data safe haven at the IOE. So it's a very secure, separate drive that only I had access to. So anything that was collected in Newcastle was then transferred to me, and I stored it in that file there. And we also had the research assistants would score the data, the booklets for each child by hand, and then they would plug that into Excel sheets. And so that was all combined together. So there's a lot of combing through data to make sure that it was accurate, because that's really key. Not only has to be secure, but it's got to be accurate. And then we had to analyse it. We did some ANOVAs to show, or analysis of variance, to show that there was a difference between baseline and follow-up, or pre-test and post-test. And we also looked at what other factors could be contributing that. So we got, a main effect of over time. Was there a change between baseline and follow-up? And then we also controlled for age, because, we would expect that the children would be getting better anyway, as there was 7 months approximately between the 2 time points. So we'd expect just general development, they would improve in these skills. We also controlled, we wanted to see if there was an effect of language status, because we had a lot of children, particularly in London, who are dual language learners. So they speak another language or more at home, not just English. So is that having an effect on their language development in English that we're testing? And then we also looked at the intervention effect. So we were able to put into our models whether those in the intervention group were better than those in the control group. And so that's how we did it. If you want to know any more information, I can share with your instructor information about our website, where we will publish the final report there. Thanks very much.